Right, let me see how I do on this. So, first, I better start off with a confession, which is I have a bit of a size complex. And I think I really need to get that off my chest as I stand here today. It could be because I'm a short British guy living in Scandinavia. That really, you could see that could be a problem for me. But the more deep-seated root of my size problems is I am a very regular at coming to the CEO network that SaaSiest runs. Was that a good enough plug? That was great. Thank you, I'll keep going. You can pay me afterwards. But one of the problems is I come to these events and people show their ARR, they show their scale up, they show their growth curves, and they're all enormous. You know, we had it this morning. A startup that's 18 months old that's doing 120 million in ARR. That's more than my bloody TAM. You know, I am running one of those, what did you call them, Nathan? Durable compounders, AKA boring. But I want to talk here today because I think being a durable compounder, being in a kind of smaller market has its attractions. It can be a good place to be. And so I just want to talk briefly this afternoon around that and around a little bit around what you need to think about should you find yourself in one of these. Right, so I think I've already set this up. I think my customer base, and I'm going to come to it in a moment with some facts, is probably about the type of size of customers that many of you would probably add in your first 2 quarters of existence. And you're going to be a little bit surprised, I think, when you see that we are 45 million business with the size that we are. And the other thing is about our customer base is I can go through our CRM. I recognize most of the names. I can almost put names to the CEOs of most of our customers because we're that small. So, what space are we in? Now, let me just get one thing, and the lawyers in my company will be having a heart attack. Yes, we are that company that I woke up to read SaaSiest news 2 weeks ago, and we were the headline in terms of potentially assisting sanctions individuals flying around the world. None of it true, but I'm just going to stop at that point because the lawyers would advise me to not go further forward. But in case anyone from Sweden is thinking about it, yeah, we're that company. So let's get that out. I'm amongst friends here. Hopefully no SVT reporters in the room. So we are in the business of private aviation. And as Nathan said, it is a nice business to be in. Unfortunately, I fly Ryanair more than I do private jets. I'm on my way to London tomorrow. It'll be Ryanair. There's no private jet waiting for me at Kastrup. But we're in the business of, we have 2 sets of customers. We have operators on one side that have aircraft, and we have what we call in the industry brokers, who are really travel agents, who represent the end flyers. And we serve both sides. So we're very much a marketplace business. We got supply on one side, demand on the other. And our model is we charge both sides, and we do that as a software, as a subscription service. So we're a mix between marketplace and a SaaS offering. I told you I'd come back to my size problem. So here we are. We've been running 24 years. Here I am on stage talking about being a successful durable compounder. 24 years is the proof. We were very early on in terms of being in the SaaS model. To such a point, many softwares, all of you who start up new companies take for granted you can just go out and acquire pricing and subscription management softwares. When we started, they didn't exist. But we've been around a long time. We have 2,500 customers, and we have bulk of our subscription revenue earned on those 5,200 aircraft. Just to give you an idea of the size, there's probably about 8,000 aircraft in the world that are available for charter. Maybe I should check. Has anyone ever chartered a private jet in this room? Hooray! Thank you very much. We have one in the audience. And no, there's no point coming to ask me. I would have to go and ask our customers afterwards if you want to fly private. We occasionally get to put our employees on empty legs, but given that we're based in Gothenburg, there aren't many that arrive there. Right. So, default SaaS playbook. Bigger is better. Isn't that what it boils down to? You go for the biggest market you can get, steepest growth curve, biggest opportunity, biggest set of challenges, but the upside is really there to be had. Across that 24 years, we've raised multiple rounds of financing, and we've been bought and sold as a company twice over the last 4 years. When we first looked at selling the company, here in Scandinavia, we went out, Stockholm, where most of finance is based. People weren't really sure how to evaluate a company our size. Because if you look at the TAM here that we were serving, it was hard for people to get a valuation for buying us in totality at that point, more than 25 million US dollars. We were sold 18 months ago for $250 million. And that speaks to the power. If you can get a small market right and you can get your niche right, there is pricing power and customer stickability, if I'm making up English words, to be had from occupying that space. So, in a niche, what do you need to think about? It may sound obvious, people talk. People really talk in ways that you don't control. You saw the size of our customer base. It's aviation are our customers all working in. They move, they talk to colleagues, they move between companies. We're still in industry in terms of private aviation that can gather in Las Vegas in November and Geneva in May, and most people have had a chance to connect with each other. So the thing to be really aware of is people talk around your product in ways that you don't control. And what gets spoken around moves really quickly around the industry, and your reputation starts being built. And that reputation is the key word. When you're serving a niche, it's your reputation that becomes your growth engine. I'm often very jealous when I look at larger companies that can go and, particularly serving the B2C space, where you can screw up with one customer and you've got another several 100,000 where you can target again. In that B2B area, in a much smaller industry, you don't get to screw up very often without it really damaging your reputation. So, people talk. Because people talk, it does change the way you need to run your business and how you think about your business. We often employ people from other SaaS businesses, and it takes them a while to get their head straight that there isn't an endless sales machine that can just go out and acquire new logos. There's just not enough to go for. What you do is you have to grow your customers, grow the depth of your engagement, the amount you earn, the value that you deliver to those customers. Also, it changes the way you have to think about your product, particularly in our area where we're really focused on building for interactions. Interactions between people working in the same company, but also particularly interactions between people working across the industry. A product that a lot of interactions happen in a small niche area becomes a very sticky product. And the third element is once you start having some penetration in a small niche, you really get to that point where your network effect kicks in. But it's not that you're selling to one account. Every time you're selling, you're really selling into the wider market, because back to that concept, your customers are talking to each other. So, in a niche, customers compare notes. I remember going to a location where we had 4 of our customers. We opened negotiations with the first of the customer. Within 3 minutes, they told me exactly what the other 3 customers in the same location pay. Like most of you, we have a terms and conditions that says, no, you cannot tell what you are paying for our product. Like most of the terms and conditions for most of our products, customers don't always follow them to the letter. And so that's an interesting position because it means it's very visible, because your product is a combination of your terms and conditions, your pricing, and yes, the product that you're working hard to build. Which means, takes you on to the other thing, as your customers are talking to each other, any gaps that you have in your product or your offering become very, very explicit. And you win, not by just trying to add endless product features, but you win by trying to think about, and you could say for all of products, what is really that core functionality that's going to work across that broad stretch? And the other thing that happens is, because customers are talking to each other all the time, they start quickly sharing, if there's a gap in your product, they quickly start sharing the workarounds that they use to get around your product and do what they're trying to do collectively. So effectively, you end up teaching your customers very quickly, do something outside of us. And in a small niche, you want to avoid that at all costs. The other thing that happens is, if you make a mistake, it really doesn't stay with a single customer. Just like that pricing example, it broadcasts out very quickly across the industry. We had our first, like lots of companies, we had our first play with a very small, as a durable compounder. We're not really playing hard in the AI space, and maybe I shouldn't say that. But we had our first few product features that came out in Q1. Very proud of what we were trying to do. We had one small outage that was partly related to us, partly outside of our control. The only thing our customers spoke around was the outage. All of the features that we had done, and that outage was, unfortunately, it was 42 minutes of outage, but on a platform that is trying to control bookings between customers, that amounted to a lifetime for a lot of businesses. And so that becomes super critical to understand that you really need to, you're as good as your last mistake in many ways when you're playing in that small niche. So every interaction becomes critically important. The other thing that is thinking around is, and you could say this again for most businesses, when you're serving a small market or a niche, your expansion isn't something you just put down on a business plan. It's not something that your roadmap is automatically going to deliver. Your expansion depends on going deeper and growing with customers. And so that is earned through the trust that you build with customers. And it means that your reputation becomes your pipeline, much more than the pipeline that is, in many ways, the one that we're all watching in Salesforce. Your reputation is not to be underestimated. It's not your marketing, although your marketing helps build the brand, which is obviously part of your reputation. It's not just your outbound motion. I can't stress enough, it's the reputation that's projecting and proceeding ahead of you in the market. And reliability becomes your calling card. Because as you build your product, people really do know what others are using. I come back to this theme around people are talking. And as you look and think about what you're building out, gaps, as I spoke around earlier, become very quickly radiated out in your product. And so you really need to think around how that your product teams are engaging with things that go to be working across the broader industry, because that space is pretty small. And the other thing to think about is in terms of customer acquisition. We were trying to land a very large deal as we got into the US. And we spent a lot of time preparing for decks and everything else. Within 2 minutes of getting within the conversation, we understood that they'd spoken with 3 other customers. They'd already made up their mind. So either you're in a position where you're then, because of the size of the niche you're playing to, having to overcome their objections, or you're actually playing along because they've already decided to go with you. But it changes that approach that you're taking to selling. So if you're at an early stage, I think there is a lot of focus around how big is this total addressable market that you're in? How big is the opportunity that you're playing in? I would ask that question in a different way. Don't ask just how big it is, ask how connected it is. Do customers talk? Does reputation travel? Because that is really where the trust compounds and your reputation builds. So, a niche, a small space like ours, it has its pros and cons, or it has its trade-offs. You will look smaller. I used the example of trying to sell the company where we did look smaller from the outside. And the potential was not there. You will have to say no more often to things that look like growth, particularly to your board, but that can dilute really what is your core offering to that niche you're really trying to be successful in. Because it's not until your reputation is established that you start moving beyond. We had a decision, were we going into private cargo, or did we stay in our passenger side? We stayed on the passenger side, but it felt like saying no to a big opportunity. And growth will look different. Yes, Nathan had the slide going up with our growth. If you looked hard at it, you're going to be saying they're growing between 14 to 18% a year. It's not a top line, it's not very sexy, but it's something we've done almost every year over that 20-year period of our history. So growth looks different. But you will gain a situation where you get, if you get it right, that stronger retention and your ability to really drive long-term revenue growth with your customers. So to win in a niche, I'd really say design for reputation, visibility around the reliability of your product. I spoke around the outage. You need to be as transparent as possible, and your right to earn that expansion. Because the way I think about it now is pretty simple. In a large market, you can grow by not always getting it right. But when you're serving a smaller niche, you don't have that luxury. So you really do need to work on the trust, building the reputation, because you don't get to outrun that reputation when you're serving a small niche. And at that, I shall say thank you.
Okay, are you okay with a couple questions? Yep. One good question. What question do we have for Oliver? Make it a good one. No pressure. Is it a good one?
I don't know. He always has great questions.
Okay, done. Daniel says so.
So, Oliver, what do you say when your board asks you to increase prices in addition to whatever you have regulated in your contracts, and you know that that is going to make your customers furious? And they're going to tell everyone else that you are doing things that reduce the trust in you.
So we've been in that situation quite recently, in fact. And I think there is an element around the value that we deliver, because part of this is an internal debate around how sure are you about the value you bring into a market, and therefore how much do you think you can extract on the pricing? And so when we've done those type pricing changes, we've been very uniform and very upfront with our entire customer base when we've done that, because trying to hide them away always backfires. So we've always been much more forward in terms of the communication out around what we're doing and why we're doing it. Yes, it's not always liked by customers, but that's the approach that we take to do it.
All right, guys, another round of applause for Oliver. Thank you, sir.